Every Memorial Day, we find new stories to tell, new heroes, new moments of pain to recall, the moments that define the American soldier. Our guest has dedicated his career to telling those unique stories, the ones that honor the legacy of those who serve. And in his new book, Legend, his focus is on the Vietnam War, the war that still sticks in our consciousness as the one where soldiers came home hated and despised and had to fight for their right to be honored. Let's welcome Eric Blehm to the Hard Line. Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, Eric. When we look back at the Vietnam War, and I know that in a lot of your research this had to come true, this still remains a watershed moment, if you will, in our relationship with the military, because we turned from World War II in Korea to hating our military, and it took decades for these men and women to actually get a little respect back. It still is a moment that we look at and watch at even today.
Yeah, one of the men I write about in Legend, his name was Pete Galis. He was a door gunner and a crew chief on a Mad Dog gunship. And he came back from the war. He remembered coming back to Oakland and being told to take his uniform off by an officer at the airport because he didn't want any trouble stirred up, or he said stay in the USO. It took him 10 years, actually more than 10 years. He was in the 80s, and he told me how he went to his public library one day. He'd finally gotten the guts to wear a sweatshirt that said, "Vietnam veteran, proud of my service." And as he held the door open for a woman about his same age, she looked at him and looked at his shirt and said, "How can you be proud of that?" This is just in the 80s, and he looks back now, and I talked to him when we recounted this mission from 1968, and he said, I see men and women getting their hands shaken from complete strangers in airports today. And in my way, I look at it as we took the bullet, the Vietnam veterans took the bullet for the current generation, the future generations of our warriors, because those stories got out and they knew the mistreatment, the shame that they felt by coming home. And that he feels that that'll never, ever happen again because of what they went through. And so that's a victory. He feels it's a victory for what the Vietnam veterans have gone through and did go through, because that's not going to happen again in our history.
Do you get the sense that the Vietnam veterans still want to make people remember that? Because I've talked to a couple who said, I want to forget whatever happened there. But there are those who say, no, I want people to remember that we were spit on and that we were laughed at and that we were ridiculed, because it's important to the growth of this nation. Do you agree?
I agree. Well, this is there are so many stories of valor and heroism and brotherhood that came from that war. And I mean, those stories can come from the most unpopular war. They're fighting for their brothers beside them. They believed in the mission, and these guys came home. And the guys I spoke with, these weren't draftees. There's that idea that everybody was drafted. Every person I interviewed for this book, dozens, every one of them were volunteers. They believed in their mission. They came home and they do want to tell the story. In fact, one individual I was speaking to, a lot of his buddies were killed that day, May 2nd, 1968, which is the topic of the mission, or the date of the mission that this book is about. He started crying on the phone when I was talking to him. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make you go back to that place in your mind. And he said, Eric, I'm not crying because of that. I'm crying because I didn't think anybody cared. And the fact that you called me and you hunted me down to ask what happened that day, it just meant the world to him. And that's when the book, for me, became a calling. Like there's a moment in every one of my books that I've written when I have that connection where I feel I'm going to do everything I can to do these guys right. And that was one of them. They do want to have their stories told.
I got about 90 seconds left. Vietnam changed the way we look at war. 9/11 changed you personally, did it not?
It did. I was an editor of a snowboarding magazine. I wrote stories of adventure journalism. And after that, I took a step back and said, what is your part in this? What can you do? And that's when I decided to write the stories of those who served, like The Only Thing Worth Dying For, Fearless, the story of Adam Brown, a Navy SEAL, and now Legend, which tells the story of Roy P. Benavides and the 240th Assault Helicopter Company. It's an honor to tell these stories. It's a gift.
Eric, I got about a minute left here, so let me ask you something that I've talked to a lot of people about in the last couple of days, and some of our guests earlier here on the show. I think it's time we stop saying, and not demonizing people, but stop using the words Happy Memorial Day, and maybe talk about it as have a reflective Memorial Day, have a thoughtful Memorial Day, instead of using the word happy. Would you agree?
I agree. When you look at that American flag, one mother of Daniel H. Pedatory told me when I visited her house, her son was killed, one of the first in Afghanistan after 9/11. She would fix that flag and the way it draped just so on her front porch. She told me about the day she brought him home from the hospital as a baby to the day that the honor guard knocked on her door and informed the family of his death. And she said when she draped that flag and she fixed it just so every morning, it reminded her of fixing her son's collar when she sent him off to school.
It's touching just to hear that for the first moment and to hear about how parents still think, and my goodness, the stories they have. Reminder once again, everybody, the book we're talking about here is called Legend, a harrowing story from the Vietnam War of one of Green Beret's historic missions to rescue a Special Forces team caught behind enemy lines. And Eric Blehm is the author. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. We'll continue to push that forward on Memorial Day and ask people to reflect on what has been. Thanks so much. Good luck with the book.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care. Stay with us, because this is The Hard Line. We're back right after this.